Hi everyone, and welcome to another game review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy and I'm all about the mechanics. It's what I love in a game. This is my partner Maggie, and
Hello.
she's all about the theme and the thematic names for things that I always forget. Like for me, it's all about the red cubes and the blue cubes.
And I might be like, that's fish or wood or, yeah.
Whatever. Today, we are very fortunate to have received from Stonemaier Games an early review copy of the expansion for Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. The expansion is called Secrets and Soirees. Exciting. But today we thought we'd take the opportunity to review the base game as well. So if you are familiar with the base game, feel free to jump ahead. I'll put some timestamps below so you can just jump to the part where we talk about the expansion. But the base game, for those who aren't familiar, it's by Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley. Interestingly, it's a bit of a mashup of two older games. So there is Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which was by Bezier Games, which Stonemaier actually paid to license and also use some of the kind of room ideas and room mechanics. And then there's Between Two Cities, which is actually by the same two designers and feature a lot of the same semi-co-op kind of ideas and building up with tile placement. Instead of a city, a castle this time.
So let's talk a bit about the theme of Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. In this game, we have been summoned by Mad King Ludwig, who needs to have his extravagant castles. He's obsessed about castles. He's actually quite an interesting character to study and learn more a bit about, because he was actually quite eccentric and quite obsessed with fairy tales and Wagner's operas and stuff. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is, these castles took a lot of money, took a lot of people and contributors or builders, and we are some of those builders helping to create the most pleasing castle for the king. And we're going to be doing this by making sure that the combination of rooms or the placement of the rooms are such that they have good synergies, because we wouldn't be wanting to have a very loud and rowdy room right next to somewhere where we're meant to be reflecting or sleeping or being really pensive. So yeah.
We also want to get a lot of points, so let's talk about how it works mechanically. So the interesting thing about this game mechanically is that the game, or the base game, plays 2 to 7 players, but this game is going to be played simultaneously, so the game length doesn't really differ between those different player counts. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building a castle with your neighbor. And the way that works is every castle is going to start with one of these trophy rooms, and these trophy rooms are going to sit between you and the player on your left and you and the player on your right. And throughout the game, what you're going to be doing is drafting from a starting stack of 9 different tiles. You'll be looking at all of those tiles and choosing 2 rooms. These 2 rooms will be added to the castle that you're collaborating with the player on your left to build, and then the other room will be added to the castle on your right. And that's why this game is semi-co-op, because you'll be scoring points for both of the castles on your left and right. But the little trick to the game, and very clever, is that you'll only be scoring individually the castle where you get the lowest number of points, which means that you can't take your eye off the ball. You can't decide, I only want to work with Maggie, or more often than not, I only want to work with the other person. You have to work with people on either side of you in order to try and get as many points on both castles to ensure that you can get a high points overall and win the game. Now, the way that the tile placement works is that there are different types of tiles and they all have different scoring conditions. The scoring condition is written on the bottom of the tile and has actually really clear iconography to explain how it wants to be placed relative to other types of tiles. So for example, let's take the yellow tile, or what's known as the food tiles, you're welcome, which represents the kitchens or the food type areas in your castle. And what those tiles want is they will reference a particular other type of room. So in the case of this tile, it's asking for activity rooms to be placed on either side of it to the left and right. For each of the activity rooms on either side of it, you will get 2 points scoring for that tile. Sometimes they also ask for tiles to be above and below. So really they are asking for adjacencies with different types of tiles. Then if we take a different type of tile, for example, the utility rooms, which are the orange tiles, they're looking for another type of tile, which it will reference. They want them to be connected to that tile. So you can create, first of all, an adjacency, but then you can snake that same type of tile around to create the longest continuous line of that type of tile, and that's what you'll score at the end, 1 point for every connected tile of that type. I won't go through all of them, but some require you to collect different sets of different colors for the tile to be surrounded with a particular type of tile. It's all very straightforward and very easy to pick up based on what it says on the tile. Now, the other fun thing that happens when you're building up your castle is that you get a special bonus every time you collect 3 of the same room type. So for example, the food rooms, as soon as we would collect 3, we would get a bonus whereby we get to draw 5 cards and choose one to add to our castle. Now, all the bonuses are different for the different colored tiles, but they all give you something that's quite beneficial and helps really boost the number of points. You also get a special tile once you reach 5. So you get the first bonus at 3. When you get to 5, you get to place a special room type in your castle, which gives you lots and lots of points. So it's really a game about optimizing your tile placement. Interestingly, when you are choosing your tiles, you are not allowed to speak to the person next to you, the people next to you, the collaborators on your castle. But once you've chosen the 2 tiles that you're going to play, you can then talk to them about how to optimize the placement of the 2 tiles that you've collectively chosen.
A bit of forward planning.
A bit of forward planning, yes. So let's talk about what secrets and soirees the expansion brings to the party, so to speak. Brings to the soiree.
Yeah.
You can first of all see that this purple insert here is what the expansion comes in, and it clicks in or fits in really nicely.
Very satisfying.
Oh, so satisfying with the other game trays in the box. And it just is, it's a dream to unpack and to play and to pack back up again.
It was clearly something that was thought of in advance.
Definitely. Actually, Jamie said that the one restriction he gave the designers was that the new expansion had to fit within that box size. So let's talk about what actually is included in this new wonderful tray. And that is a whole heap of new tiles. And there are a few new tile types that are quite interesting. My favorite, I think, is the secret room.
Yeah.
The secret room is a tile that basically replicates the tile next to it, depending on which way the arrow is pointing. Where you place it, it will just mimic the room type and the scoring condition of the tile that it's sitting next to or pointing to. And that's really kind of cool because for 2 reasons. One, you can place it next to a tile that you know is going to have a high score for you at the end of the game. The other thing is that it mimics the color and type of tile, so you denote that by adding a little icon onto that secret room tile to show you what it's mimicking, so that you can keep track of that bonus feature that I mentioned earlier when you get 3 or 5 of the same room type. The next room type is the activity rooms. Now, the activity rooms are a little more punishing because they want to have simply tiles at the top, left and right and below, and you will score 1 point for each of those tiles, so a maximum of 4 points. However, if you have a particular type of room surrounding it and any of the 8 surrounding tiles, you will only score 1 for that tile.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly mean tile where you are looking to either get those full 4 points or take your chances and try and not place any of...
Keeps you on your toes.
It does keep you on your toes.
Ensure that you don't absent-mindedly put the tile that it doesn't, or the type of room that it doesn't want nearby.
Exactly. Now, the third room type that's introduced for a good soiree is the ballroom. And the ballroom is a special tile that you get to add to your castle when you get 3 of the activity rooms, which are also a new tile. I love to add a ballroom because the ballroom to your castle actually activates a particular room type in the 2 adjacent castles. So nothing to do with your own castle, but when you're placing one down and you do get the opportunity to look at 3 and choose one and put that into your castle, it will say that you'll score a point for every type of, for example, food tile that's placed in the castles to the left and right. So it's a good tile for forcing you to kind of look up and look around and kind of engage with what other people are doing with their castles as well. So they are the 3 main room types that have been included in the expansion. It also includes a new score pad with all of those new tile types, as well as a new player aid to explain all of the new tile types. It also includes a range of new tiles of the types from the base game, as well as some new point scoring cards that relate to the new tile types. So lots of bits and pieces to kind of bolster the game in terms of number of tiles, which means that the game actually now plays up to 8, as well as low as 1 with a solo player mode, which we'll discuss a little bit later.
2 different solo modes.
Two different solo modes.
So let's talk a little bit about the thematic integration. So one of the things that I really enjoy about this game is that you're very much designing or getting to choose what the interior of these castles is going to be. I'm a little bit like sort of looking more into the history of Mad King Ludwig, and mad is sort of in quotations because we know that he was eccentric. The mad thing is sort of being questioned because it was a bit politically convenient to remove him from the throne. The thing about Mad King Ludwig is a lot of it was the extravagant exteriors as well, but you don't really get a sense for that. Like, this is all very much just the internal rooms that were part of the castle. Obviously all the colors relate to all the different types of rooms. The actual thematic, like how the adjacencies and how the synergies work, I find that sometimes they do make sense, and it's kind of like, it almost feels like a nice Easter egg, even though it's not really an Easter egg. I probably don't know what the definition of an Easter egg is. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it does. I do get a little kick out of, of course you would want this next to it, or you wouldn't want this type of tile.
That doesn't come through so clearly for me, as much as the room types, like the fact that corridors can be below ground and above ground, or the basement tiles.
You kind of have to be looking for it. Yeah,
which I probably not.
Yeah. Same with like, the guest rooms or the sleeping rooms. Their main thing is that they need to have one of everything around them. Not around them, but just in the castle, which kind of makes sense because if you're going to be sleeping there, you probably want to have all your amenities. I just realized I don't think there's ever restrooms.
There's no restrooms. They wouldn't be very fun tiles, though.
There may be, but
maybe it's a utility.
Yeah, it might be a utility one, but I don't know. I don't know if it was the time of you go outside to. No, surely not.
Bedpan.
Yeah,
it's a bedpan.
Yeah. So from a thematic integration, it's not the most immersive experience, but you do kind of, when you're talking, particularly when you're playing multiplayer and going, ooh, we really need to increase the number of this. We need more food. We need more. So I'd say it's kind of like mild to moderate.
Yeah, but even though it's not completely integrated in terms of integration as the mechanics, I quite like the different room types. Like some of them are pretty funny and fun. Yeah. Like the hall, I think there's like a hall of mirrors, and then
there's the puppy room.
Yeah, the puppy room. Like, so some of the rooms themselves are quite outrageous, which is like really fun to kind of, when you read it out. I've just added a snake pit to my castle, and it does make this really creative, fun castle.
Yeah. I also like with the expansion. So with the secrets and soirees, the secret rooms are the ones that mimic other rooms, and that makes sense because they're usually like a trapdoor or like a hidden secret passage that I don't know why it then would be like you go through a secret passage to end up in the same type of room that you were just in. Like, but it sort of makes sense once you're kind of playing.
They can also chain together, which would create like a passageway.
Right. Yeah. So it just expands the fun of the room that you were in. So and with the activity rooms, again, I that's probably the one where I sort of found that synergy thing happen more often with the type of room that it doesn't want to have nearby. So again, you kind of have to be reading what the room itself is and why it, and again, there might be a bit of like thematic stretching here. Why wouldn't want to have a particular room? So for example, some of them, like the ones that made me kind of ping why is the loud rooms. So the ones that have music or the ones that have a lot of, the louder type of activity didn't want to have a sleeping room adjacent to them, which makes sense because you wouldn't want, at the time, I don't know if it was the bass pumping right next door. But yeah, so I think as a thematic experience, it's all right. It's not like the most thematic, but it's also like it's got some nice little nods, and all the colorfulness of the different rooms. I find that really adds to that experience overall.
One thing I also really like when you're building out your castle is that they can take any shape or form. So you might have like a really skinny but really tall castle, or you might just have one single level castle that sprawls out to the sides. And so when you look around the table, everyone's building this castle and they're all so different. And yeah, I really quite like that.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk a little bit about the different player counts. So with the original base game, we know that it plays 3 to 7, and that's probably its purest multiplayer format, or what it's sort of mainly intended to be, the experience of the game. They had included a 2-player variant, which is adding a 3rd player of Mad King Ludwig that then replicates or recreates a 3-player experience, and then the 2 players in that game would be taking turns to manage the choices that the king would have made. With the new expansion, we have an introduction of 2 new solo modes. So with one of them, you're introducing 2 AI or an automa experience, which is I found quite onerous to manage, because it's, again, and it's probably because of my type of, the way my mind works. I usually get distracted if I'm then having to facilitate the turn of someone else, of the AI. In this one, you're facilitating 2 whole other turns.
That's the extrovert mode, right?
Yeah, so there's an extrovert mode and an introvert mode. So in that one, you're facilitating those 2 other modes. There are a couple of really handy cheat sheets or player aids that help you track whose turn is it. And also, if you lose track, which I did multiple times, of going, whose turn should it be now, based on how many tiles are left in what round you're up to. So again, I found it, that one I found quite a bit of work to keep track of. But again, it's trying to replicate a 3-player experience. So they together, so you're playing with these two different automas are building their own castle, and then you're also building a castle with each one of them. The other mode, the introverts mode, was the one that I actually enjoyed the most. That one is more of a you're just building your own castle, and it's not an automa apparently, because it's sort of breaking some of the automa rules. So they call it faux-toma. So faux-toma as in like fake automa. But yeah, so they're building their castle, you're building your own castle, and it's a lot quicker, a lot more straightforward, and more just about optimizing the puzzle of how the rooms fit together. You don't really obviously get any of there's no co-op sort of thing, there's just none of that.
That's why it's the introvert.
That's what's the introvert. I did love how fast it was, because I felt like the other mode just went forever, and I don't know if that's, again, just me like having to switch modes and trying to keep track of everything that's happening. The new 2-player variant is sort of mimicking the introvert mode, where you're each building your own castle. So you're not actually trying to contribute, you're not, but you are forcing a tile onto the other person. So that's the King Ludwig's demand. So it's like you've got the tile that you get to choose as part of your castle, and then the one that's being handed over to you is you must build this, find a place for it.
Yeah, and I like that. So the new 2-player mode actually is a new 2 to 8-player mode, because you can also play in that mode with a whole room full of people if you like, but the castle becomes your own personal castle instead of sharing, and you're forcing tiles upon your neighbors. Basically.
It's a lot more solitaire.
It's a lot more solitaire, but you can also, there's a lot more like of the kind of hate draft. It's like the hate drafting, because you're forcing your person next to you to use a particular tile in their castle, which can mess up their castle.
Definitely,
a little bit, which I did kind of enjoy about the new 2-player.
Of course you did.
Because it forced me to interact with your castle, because I was looking at it going, oh, okay, so you really wouldn't want this tile.
Yeah.
And giving you that tile.
I found more than frustrating your plans, it was just giving you something that's futile. Like just giving you something like, this is
that's not very useful.
This is not helpful.
Yeah, there's no evil tiles.
No, it's not like this is gonna wreck everything that I've been building, like working up till now. Yeah.
So now let's talk about the experience of playing the game. Actually, when Stonemaier Games sent us the base game and the expansion to get familiar with, we had never played the base game, and so we spent a lot of time getting familiar with the base game and just playing it in its pure form. We played it at a range of player counts, everywhere from 2 all the way through to, I think, 6 people, 5 or 6 people.
5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah, and we played with multiple groups of people as well. And this game really pleasantly surprised me, at least. I hadn't heard that much about it. I feel like it kind of flew under the radar, or the people who know about it are, a little bit quiet about this one.
I'd always seen it around,
Yeah.
but it was one of those things that because it wasn't, your stock standard worker placement, resource management stuff that we love, I was like, it sort of never really kind of made it to the,
And we had played Castles of Mad King Ludwig as well, and so I didn't realize how different it was, and the between two castles part of it, and how much that kind of was part of the core mechanics, like the between two castles. I didn't realize that's what it meant. And also, we don't have any cooperative games, or I think maybe 1 or 2 cooperative games in our whole collection. But this a semi-co-op idea actually really resonated with me. I really enjoyed working together with the people on my left and right. It creates a lot of like really nice conversation.
It's a nice spin to the co-op, because it's like for us, we were more into competitive. It's like this added that element of co-op, which to me, I find that it makes me feel a little bit more relaxed, because it's like, well, the onus is not just on me to make the best out of this. It's like, well, I get to actually play with other people. But at the same time, you still have that competitive, like, oh, it still needs to be better than.
Yeah, there's still one winner, and it really definitely feels like there's one winner at the end of the game, which is really nice and really what we look for in a game. But the fact that you're all working together for most of the game actually creates this really relaxed atmosphere, as Maggie was saying. It's really nice for people who are kind of a mix of gamers, and you're not sure maybe if the whole competitive intense thing is the right vibe for that kind of game night. The other thing that's really interesting is the sheer fact that it plays all the way up to 8 with the expansion, or 7 with the base game, and it doesn't actually add that much more additional time to the game. So you can still kind of play a full game in under an hour, but everyone's playing simultaneously. And so, I just think at any player count, it makes for kind of a pleasant cup of tea, late at night kind of experience.
Also a great introduction to non-gamers that are wanting to kind of learn a little bit more about just like, what are all these board game things about? Because I feel like it mitigates, because you're doing that semi-co-op, it mitigates the anxiety potential for like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, I feel overwhelmed. It's like, because you're kind of working with someone else. And if you have a bit of a crap castle, it's like, well, whose fault is it? It's kind of like a shared crap effort kind of thing. So it's not like all on you type thing, but also it's very easy to learn. Like the actual like how it works and how it all comes together is very clear to pick up and be like, oh, okay, great, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, mechanically it's quite simple. The only complication is having to explain the scoring condition for each of the individual tile types, but you can just work through them systematically. And the iconography is excellent in this game, and so you don't have to explain every tile, just every type of tile.
There's also the joy of when you do hit that 3 or 5 combo. It's like, ooh, what is it that we get? And then you kind of go to your player and go, ooh, we get this goodie or we get that goodie. And so that's quite nice, because again, it's like a joint effort when that happens. So that's the multiplayer mode. We should talk about, well, the original 2-player variant, which is when you're adding that third, you're adding a sort of like a King Ludwig, that you're both taking turns.
Yeah, so the original 2-player variant I didn't love, just because it means that for each round, one person is choosing tiles for King Ludwig as well as tiles for themselves, which means that it's kind of a bit stressful that you've got to do both when it is your turn, because you're trying to do it that quickly. But also when you're the other person, it's a bit annoyingly slow to wait for the
downtime.
Yeah, the downtime is a little bit annoying. So for me, I don't know if that trade-off was really worth it to try and recreate
I feel like it interrupts the flow for me. And then what we found is, because again, we're very competitive and not very cooperative, that became a bit of a hate drafting when we were like, whoever had the turn that was doing the managing Mad King Ludwig, it became a bit of hate drafting to the point where we ended up losing. We both lost.
Because we made King Ludwig's castle so much better than our one.
Well, because we were just too focused on, like, instead of focusing on the castle that we were building together, we were just too focused on how do I make my shared castle with Ludwig better than yours. And then it ended up being that, Ludwig had the best and we had the crappiest score.
Yeah, so we both got the same score. The new version where you can actually play with your own castle So I should say that even though that is a new variant for the expansion, you could very easily play it that way with the base game if you have it at home. So the way that you're kind of hate drafting that additional tile for the person next to you, we played that 2-player. That made for a much faster experience, but it was almost like, and I hate to say it, like I would almost kind of house rule that and maybe even add in a third round, because then it was like too fast. I don't know. Then it felt like I was, it was very, very snappy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you go.
I was gonna say, for me, the magic of this game, it's not a heavy strategy, complex sort of game. So the magic of this game is not in the puzzle itself, is in that semi-co-op experience of like, this is co-op, but it's also competitive. So when you take that away and you just make it kind of like, when you make it, this new variant is very much just focusing on the puzzle. The puzzle to me, because it's nice, but it's not that
quite simple.
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. Then I just didn't feel like there was enough in it for me. So like, if I was just going to play a 2-player game, I would probably be picking up something else. But again, that's a personal preference, because I like something meatier that I can kind of sink my teeth into. The other thing with this game is that there's a lot of luck involved, because you don't necessarily know what tiles, what types of rooms you're going to have access to. So it's very tricky to be able to plan different strategies in advance, not knowing what's going to be available. Sometimes, like, we've had games where a type of room only came out one tile once, and so if you didn't grab it at that point, then forget it. So you really have to be flexible and be reactive as the game is going.
But also that issue is with any drafting game, worse at a lower player count. So with a lower player count, you're seeing fewer tiles, because you're always drafting 2 and then passing the stack to your left or right, depending on which round it is. And so what happens is, in a larger, player count, you are getting fresh stacks of tiles, which means you're getting more variability. So I agree. The magic in this game is really at the higher player count. I really appreciate that they have added in more variety, the solo modes, because, people are looking for that now. It's much harder to get gaming groups together. But for me, this game, I think, will stay in our collection. Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing is that it'll stay in our collection. I will never disentangle the expansion from the base game.
Add to it.
And it adds to it, but it adds to it in such a seamless way that it's almost like, why take it out again?
Yeah.
So everything gets mixed together, and now this is just the game. This is just the game. And so I think it has a very unique position in our library, because it does play such a range of player counts. It feels very similar at 3 or 4 players, and I imagine it feels very similar at 7 or 8 players. And I can take it to work, and it's not, the rules overhead is not too high, but you can kind of get that semi co-op experience, and the time of the game doesn't blow out. The
other thing I should say is there is now a scoring app that helps speed up the scoring process. So the way the app works is actually pretty cool, in that you point the camera of your phone to your final castle, and it takes a little bit of like moving around and readjusting. You have to make sure that you have the right lighting, but then it'll pick up the tiles and their adjacencies, and then we'll actually like add it all up for you, which is quite good, because often
incredible.
I found that the scoring was something that was challenging, particularly with some of our friends. Like I was fine by just going the way that the scoring pad suggests, which is just like room type by room type. But we had a friend that's like, no, I'm just gonna go like
tile by
tile, and that was a mess.
That was such a mess. He's like, this way's faster. We're like, no, it's not.
Don't ever do that. So, but just going back to the app, the only thing with the app is it's not an official Stonemaier Games app. It's a third-party fan-made app. I found it's $7.99 Australian in the Australian App Store.
Only in iOS?
iOS. There will be an Android version, but it's not available yet. It's expensive. Like, if you think about all of the board game based apps, for the game itself, that's usually the price that it retails. So for a scoring only app, it's expensive. The other thing that I found is that it also kind of relied heavily on having good lighting, and sometimes it struggled to pick up the tile. Sometimes it struggled to pick up the token. So when you have one of these, it has included the expansion, but when you have the token of the secret room, sometimes I've kind of found myself having to kind of move it around to see if it would detect it. And sometimes I found that if I cross related it with like actually adding up by myself, there were some mistakes. So it's for an app that's expensive, I probably wouldn't be in that I wouldn't be able to fully trust. I probably wouldn't be making the investment. But it is a really cool, like, it's a really cool kind of gimmick.
And especially if you don't, augmented reality is really cool, but especially if you don't, find the scoring intuitive. Like, I think that Maggie and I are particularly fast at doing the scoring, but I think some of our other friends did struggle with the way that the score thing is figured out, or if you've got a big group and you're trying to do it a bit quicker, like in a workplace or something, passing around the phone to do all of the scores might be a bit faster. So I appreciate that it's being made. It isn't a Stonemaier official app, but they do endorse it in the rule book.
And it's a pretty cool experience.
So that's our review of Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig and its expansion, Secrets and Soirees. I don't know why, but it's just so fun to say. Secrets and Soirees. If you enjoyed this review, please hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel already. We do 2 ongoing series, Small Talk, which is all about small filler games, and we get to chat about all sorts of topics. And the other is Back Chat, where every fortnight we rank our top 10 Kickstarter/crowdfunding games or campaigns that we are actually spending our own money on. So please stick around, check out those series, and we'll also be back with more big box game reviews very soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.